Hi, friends. Today I have Jason Thomas, who has an amazing background working in compliance at Pfizer. So he's coming from big pharma, and we're starting to be big cannabis. So I thought it might be an interesting discussion to kind of see what we need to do, and who better than someone who's coming from there. So, Jason, welcome. Why don't you start by telling people what exactly it is you do?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Of course.
Big fan of the show, big fan of you and everything you got going on.
Thank you.
So I worked for Pfizer for about 10 years. Prior to that, it was Wyeth. We got acquired, so 15 years combined. I spent most of my career in a compliance function in one capacity or another, whether it be audit, quality control, quality assurance, solution delivery, IT risk management, really working with highly regulated processes, people, not people, well, the people are regulated too, right?
Sure.
People, processes, and technology, right? So those three areas, and applying control frameworks, helping people stay compliant. I've seen both sides of the fence. I've been on the audit side where people cringe when they hear you knocking, and I've been on the operational side where people truly need your help to get their shop where it needs to be, right? So 2017, I started planning my jump into the cannabis industry. 2018, I made that jump. I came up with a concept for a multi-state coalition, cannabis coalition of quality control, regulated auditors, technology professionals, people that can really service all parts of the value chain. I say value chain because it's more than just seed to sale. It's pre-seed and post-sale. Really operate in the best interest of the patients to keep everyone compliant.
So let me say, when people hear compliance, or especially the word auditor, the first thing I'm sure most people think is the IRS, like getting audited. So if you're working and you hear an auditor's coming into your company, you're like, oh God, people are going to lose their jobs. Like, this is going to cost me a lot of money. He's going to say things aren't up to code. Like, it rarely seems like a good word. So why don't you tell people why having an auditor could be a good thing?
100%.
Yeah.
Because I'm the guy who's going to help you fix what's wrong. No, ultimately, you want to know what's wrong before a regulatory authority that can actually shut you down comes walking through your facility. I'm not going to shut you down.
Okay.
But ultimately, having an audit, a mock audit, an inspection readiness review to make sure you've got all the right quality control, procedural aspects in place. You know, your employees are trained, the records are where they need to be. You've got your I's dotted, your T's crossed. That is really the intent of why you should have an audit performed, or even have an audit on staff, or make sure you have your quality protocols in place, because it's to your benefit, right? It's a second set of eyes. It's an independent review, third-party review that you can count on not being biased. It's not having one of your employees executing it who might be executing the controls that we're talking about.
Sure.
It's a conflict of interest. So it gives you a sense of comfort on a periodic basis, whether you do it quarterly, annually. So you know you're in that 24/7 state of inspection readiness. Because when the feds do come, and the FDA will eventually come in and perform audits, inspections, surprise inspections. The state does it. States do surprise inspections now. You just want to be in that state of compliance, ultimately.
So, I mean, I think most people, their first thought is, I'm a small business. I have, a bottom line I have to think about. This sounds expensive. Isn't this just something that I can cut from my budget that's going to cost money? Maybe this is great for those big MSOs, but is there a way you can do this to also save money for your business where it becomes feasible for smaller operators?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of options, right? And it all comes down to scale. We see everything from the one-person operation to the multi-state operators in this industry. So it comes down to scaling and knowing the criticality of compliance at certain points in your business, right? I think we talked about this the other day. We were saying the difference between legal compliance and internal operational quality compliance, right? It's night and day. And every time I hear someone say compliance, it's usually a lawyer speaking, and I have to leave the room. No offense, lawyers. I love you guys, especially the cheap ones.
Half my friends are cannabis lawyers.
But there is a way to make it affordable. And, for the smaller mom and pop shops, if you're just getting going, even if you've been in business for several years, but you're still reasonably small, educate yourself, right? You have to have either tools and resources at your disposal to know where the market's going to go. It's a challenge. I'll say that. But if you are focused in one state, it makes it a little easier.
So what are some resources someone could do this on their own, like websites or things they can check out?
Yeah, I mean, there's sites like Canna out there and Simplify that help automate streams of information.
Hmm.
So you're receiving daily regulatory updates as opposed to you having to go out and hunt. Makes it a push versus a pull,
Cool.
which is key for this industry because it's changing daily, right? And so, especially if you operate in, or want to operate in different states. Um, I would get a membership to something like that so you can stay plugged in as much as possible. Um, but in terms of keeping the costs low, you can really do a lot of the work internally. I mean, we're
Hmm.
talking about internal operations and procedures.
Yeah.
So it's documenting what you say you're going to do and then doing it, right? So create your SOPs, train your staff, and then you have to make sure those control points are executed.
Yeah.
Where it transfers over into the legal side is the regulatory state requirements that need to be implemented into those internal procedures,
Yeah.
right? So the testing requirements and the packaging requirements, that then becomes operational, right? And you're responsible for executing against those controls.
Okay. So you definitely kind of need a cannabis specific lawyer. And then at a certain point, it's like they develop or translate what the regulations are. And then someone like you who comes in, guy with the clipboard, maybe, to back in the
I don't
day.
have a clipboard.
You,
So,
your forefather in this job had a clipboard. You have I don't know, a device of some sort.
tablet. It's a tablet now. It's just a,
No, you have
yeah,
a drone. Now you
right.
have a drone.
But you're right. It's a matter of, not everyone needs policies and procedures day one, right?
Yeah.
It's when you're putting product out the door and it's something that is being consumed or actually touching a consumer,
Hmm.
then you need to be prepared to have, adequate mechanisms in place for your
Yeah.
operations, right? And it's not a whole, like you don't need a disaster recovery plan for your
Yeah.
small business. If you have assets that you are concerned about, sure, then maybe you do.
Yeah.
So when you do have a large inventory of something to that effect, then maybe you have to change your insurance. You have to put in other protocols in place. So knowing when to put in certain compliance elements, certain quality standards,
Yeah.
certain operational things, it changes throughout your business as you grow. OSHA requirements come into play if you have a physical facility, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't have to worry about that right away.
So
So
as you grow, that makes me think that this sounds like consulting work for a very large percent of the cannabis industry. What point are we going to have in-house auditors? Is that something probably just strictly for MSOs at this point? But when do you see that tipping point when we start seeing in-staff jobs for this?
yeah, it goes back to size, right? And if you're an MSO and you're operating in multiple states, you want that consistency. You want
Hmm.
to have that same person or group of people operating internally in the best interest of the company, right? Because then they're a dedicated group that's purely focused on audits. You're probably executing a couple hundred a year at that point, right?
Yeah.
Um, but for someone who's smaller, you don't always need. You're not going to run out and get an audit department day one,
Yeah.
right? But you may be that auditor. So check your own books, educate yourself on what control points need to get reviewed.
Hmm.
Because ultimately, when you do hire someone, you're going to have to tell them what to do. And you can consult out for that. I mean, we have a team of auditors that can come in and do mock audits. We have people that can be seated in like a temp to hire program, which I love the idea of that because it really helps put the professionals throughout the industry, let them work internally in these companies, bring some of that life science regulatory compliance knowledge to the table. And it's a trainer type of program, right? The more individuals that we have in the industry, putting that knowledge out there from a compliance standpoint and holding the hands to get people to the GMP level, the FDA's
Yeah.
expectations, the better off most companies will be. So
Very
you
cool.
definitely don't
And
want to get an order day one. I
no,
wouldn't.
no, no. Yeah, well, so someone like Pfizer, when do you think they're really going to be getting their hand in the cannabis game? Because they're gearing up already, but
Yeah, yesterday. So
yeah,
Pfizer actually has the second most patents in cannabis next to GW Pharma, or at least they did back in 2018 when I was doing my analysis. I actually pitched some stuff to them around this internally. But yeah, they have the second most patents in cannabis, or did, next to GW Pharma. So they're already strategizing, probably mostly on the CBD side initially, right?
yeah,
They did have a consumer branch that just spun off, so I have to believe that's part of their strategy. But again, it's one product, right? And what everyone always forgets about pharma, they're also international, right?
Hmm.
We're talking about, obviously cannabis is a global industry, but right now for Pfizer to come in for one product and risk all their other sales
Yeah.
in getting shut down by, the FDA, it's just not, it works against their strategy. So I think you're going to see it incrementally. You're going to see it in the CBD space. All these pharma companies are already starting to kick off pilots and doing studies. Plus, with the election, right, and Biden coming in, it's likely going to get descheduled before it gets decriminalized
Hmm.
across the U.S. Excuse me. So, I think that's going to open up a window, not that they need one opened, but for big pharma
Yeah.
to come in and do clinical trials in this space, right? So you're going to see the clinical trial aspects of this evolve.
Hmm.
And I think that's going to be a big focus for the big Canna and the big pharma. But
Hmm.
my concern is if it becomes a requirement to clinical trials, we all know the price tag that's
We
associated
all
with
cut out all small business because they can't
it.
afford
Nobody would be able
billions
to
of
afford
dollars.
it.
Yeah.
Pharma can't afford it. It's ridiculous. And plus the time could be upwards of 10, 15 years to get a product through a clinical trial, depending on
Yeah.
what we're talking about and the efficacy levels that you're looking for. So that can't happen. That would just
Yeah.
be a complete wedge in the industry and prevent it from opening doors for anyone.
And do you
So
think that's a possibility once this goes federal and we start looking at federal regulations that we're going to start see levels of compliance that cripple the industry to some degree being made by people who don't understand that?
uh, it could happen.
Yeah.
I think everyone who's doing what they're doing, thank you everyone, in this industry, um, we have a unique opportunity to prevent that from happening. We're shaping it now. They're looking for input left and right. The FDA's constantly looked and solicited input
Hmm.
from the industry. Um, some of us wish they would just take a firmer stance or hire some people internally.
Of
you know,
course. So do you think when a company like Pfizer comes in, I so often look at the adult use space with edibles and, when the big food companies are coming in or Marlboro, when that's going to, crush the cannabis market. Do you think when big pharma comes in, all these medical dispensaries are just going to get crushed up and absorbed and really it's going to destroy any kind of mom and pop industry?
I hope not. Uh,
Yeah.
Honestly, before everyone has a chance to get into this industry, we need to, hold on to that for as long as possible. But very well could happen. You
Yeah.
know,
It's yeah, I mean and that's going to be a bunch of M&As and people getting absorbed and things like that. But
the
I mean, I think
M&A
we have a
landscape.
window.
Yeah, we do, and the M&A landscape is going to be very interesting. We've seen it already kick
Yeah.
off with the MSO at the MSO level. We're going to see big pharma acquiring big Canna, and big Canna is not going to be big Canna anymore. They're just going to be part of big pharma.
Yeah.
But what I'm the most excited about is the micro M&A, right? So,
So
and
wait, do you think Big Canna won't be its own thing in an adult use sense either? Because obviously the medical will get absorbed, but we
yes,
have like, big
it
alcohol,
will.
big tobacco. So we might still have Big Canna in a recreational sense.
Good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
a valid point. You're not going to see Pfizer going after adult use markets. So it's purely going to be that medical divide.
Hmm.
It's going to be held to a higher level of standards. They might have to go through clinical trials, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
The CAPA programs, the recall process, all that fun stuff, which applies to adult use products as well. But there's going to be a lot more scrutiny in that capacity.
It's interesting because there's no other crossover. Well, not anymore. I think there used to be a recreational alcohol and medical alcohol, but we don't really have that anymore. Same thing with tobacco. These are just seen as vices, where cannabis does have a whole therapeutic side. So, yeah, it's an interesting divide to keep an eye on how that becomes different.
Right.
What regulations? So we're talking maybe 5, maybe 10 years, maybe longer till this is federally legal and eventually globally legal. So what do you think people could be putting in place now for kind of future proofing to not get tripped up when these FDA things come in and it's, oh my God, my whole world just fell apart?
Yep. You can put in whatever you want to put in. You don't have to cut corners. You can be as controlled as you want to be.
Hmm.
My advice to people is look at the FDA and what they require. There's a wealth of information on their website, wealth of information on the state websites. Um, you have to be proactive. You have to track to what's going to be coming down the pipe, right? But really the best advice I can give to people is look at the standards organizations that are out there.
Yeah.
You've got groups like Focus, the ASTM D37. ASTM is the parent organization. They have a subcommittee, D37,
Mm-hmm.
about 700 people in that group, all compliance professionals working.
Is that the thing that we'll talk about, like allowable butane parts per billion, things like that?
Correct. So they're
Yeah,
working
I've
on
read through that a
developing.
bit.
Yeah, they're getting to the real niche standards and making sure that the tolerance limits, the thresholds, and all that stuff is consistently baked into these standards. And I forget how many they have off the top of my head. And there's a number of different companies out there creating these standards, and they're all kind of working together. It's a very collaborative, environment because everyone's operating in the best interest of the patients and consumers, and getting this industry where it needs to be. So from an advice standpoint, plug into those groups. If you have a passion for, compliance, or even if you don't and just want information or resources.
You say you have a passion for compliance.
I'm sorry, it came out. I do.
You do. You really do. Wow. Good for you. I wish I had a passion for something more normal.
I have other passions. This is just like maybe 10% of my passion bucket. There's 90% of other cooler stuff. Don't go around telling people like Jason's got a passion for compliance.
No, I am. That's how I'm going to introduce you at all further networking events.
This is Jason. He's got a passion for compliance.
That guy's weird.
Anyway,
so if someone has a passion for compliance, what should they do?
Just you can really plug into these websites. I say passion for compliance because if you want to be part of that D37 group or attend some of these other standards groups, they're a wealth of resource. And if you're in that field, you should really be a part of those groups. But if not, those are the same people putting out all the information that you're going to need to apply, right? Because they're connecting the dots, they're working with the FDA, the USDA, and states, and they're operating in the best interest of the entire country right now.
Yeah.
So, and then the goal is to standardize. It's every state, right? And as much of that information you can pull into your operation as possible as it's being developed and pushed out there to be when the time comes for federal legalization.
And how are these regulations? How much do they vary state to state?
Drastically. Well, it depends on the area, right? I mean, when you look at testing as an example, packaging, labeling, every state's got different requirements, and some states.
Can I stop there and say that is driving me crazy? As like someone whose background is in graphic design, I've been following this for a really long time, and everyone thinks they're special. Like everyone needs their own certain triangle. It's like we could make this universal. We could just say, pregnant women driving under the influence. Here's a little warning: contains THC, childproof lock. Like we could just make this universal, because what's happening is every state is like afraid to copy the state before them. So we have 15 different triangles. If this would be a great business, if someone just got on top of it and said, hey, I'm going to do a federal regulation thing and just start. But what's going to happen is we're going to become federal one day and everyone's going to have to scrap all their packaging and start over. And it's just so ridiculous, but it almost feels like a contest. Yep. Now we're like we can't just take Colorado's regs and said, oh, they did a good job. They've been doing this for years. Let's copy them and improve upon them. It's like, no, we have to prove that we're the best state, every state, and we're going to do it right. And this is why all of you were wrong. And we're ending up with completely different regs and everything in every market.
I don't know about you, but my teachers always told me not to copy things from other people. So, no, you're right. I agree. It comes down to 1,000 cooks in the kitchen and 1,000 type A personalities all wanting to do things their own way. Yep. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, I think. Around the number of governing bodies that could potentially be operating in a state. So California has 3, right? You have the Cannabis Commission, you've got the Department of Agriculture, and Department of Health, I think, plays a role there. So you've got 3 bodies that you got to be complying with. Other states have less, but it's a challenge if you're an operator, right? And you're not sure what those bodies are asking for, and what they need today is different than tomorrow. So it's an evolving market.
And that's why you need someone staying on top of these things. Also, I mean, right now, until those are in place, I think this comes down to good operators and bad operators and needing it to fall on them a bit, unfortunately, because we're not protected under things like HIPAA. So when you talk about a dispensary owner, I mean, do you think we're going to have a cannabis specific one, or that should be utilized? You know, if you have any stories of where this is just completely failing our industry, because I feel like I hear a lot of that lately.
Yeah. Well, you brought up HIPAA. HIPAA is a great point. I mean, you mentioned before, we should really take as much as we can that's already been established, bring it into the industry. HIPAA is one of those, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about patients, treat it the same. I'm a patient, right? I could tell you a horror story. When I went to go register for my card, and I won't say who it is, but the person, I hope they're watching, they fix their operations. Ultimately, when I went to go register, they turned around their laptop and said, here, go enter your information. And I look in the screen, and it's the lady before me, who I happen to know. But now I know all the information about her address, and what's wrong with her. Not what's wrong. I take that back. Her
No, but
illness,
you knew her
ailment,
diagnosis?
diagnosis. Yeah, thank you.
Oh my God.
Um,
How about things like driver's license, social security, like just personal
there's
information?
a full registration page. Everything that she just got done registering as a patient.
Oh my God.
So that has to change drastically. If you're having a dispensary, treat it like a front end doctor's office, right?
Yeah.
And manage your patient's data, manage all your data in a controlled fashion. I've heard nightmares about people, and I get it, it comes down to scaling up and be what you can afford. But if you have a guy named Steve hosting all your data for your company on a server in his basement next to a hot water heater that's going to burst next week, not a good idea. So know who your third-party providers are, know where your data is going, and apply as many, historical and existing regulatory frameworks as possible. OSHA
See,
is another one.
the problem here is it's a new industry. We're starting out. Everyone needs money. Everyone's trying to do things as cheaply as possible. We have 280E, which is ruining people's tax rate. And a guy named Steve with a server in his basement probably works really cheap. So you're like, all right, this is good enough for now. When we have the money, we'll do things correctly then, And I think this is something we see across the board. We see this with CBD, people who are just getting the cheapest raw matter instead of, and I understand the need to look at our bottom line, but you're not always doing the right thing. Something like a patient's data is a huge breach of trust, and it makes it makes our industry look bad. CBD, and I've talked about this before, when they're getting product from hemp that's used for soil remediation, nuclear disasters, and then putting it in CBD. And my friends will try it and they'll be like, oh, I got them from a gas station. I got them at a convenience store, like Groupon or something. I'm like, you're probably what?
You grow an ear in the back of your head because it's probably
like you're not getting good quality, And then it's the companies that do have U.S. grown hemp. They'll tell you the extraction method. You could track it. They have the QR code with the certificate of analysis. Those people are spending more money and they can't sell it as cheaply. And I feel almost like they can't compete. So much of our industry right now is just about undercutting and price.
Yeah. And I don't have it on my screen over here. But our tagline is cultivating value through quality. And when we talk about the M&A process, I'm a big fan of using quality as a competitive advantage, right? You're going to have the people selling CBD in the gas station, and then you're going to have people who are really putting it through the ringer and making sure it's properly tested, it's got the efficacy it needs. And that is attractive to a lot of people. Granted, the M&A process, people are going to come in and they're going to want to maximize profit margins. So they may see the guy who's selling that at 7-Eleven as a more attractive acquisition.
Yeah.
But it comes down to ethics too, and morals, and what kind of product do you want to put out there? What do you want your brand to look like? What's your reputation? So it's how do you want to run your business and how do you want to be perceived in the industry? I always say let's put quality standards in place. Money will follow. Quality first, sales last.
And I think in the long term, those are the people who are going to win, because when you buy those gas station gummy bears or whatever product, the THC product, and if it's terrible, you don't buy it again. What bothers me is because so many people are trying these things for the first time, they write off the industry and not the manufacturer. But I do think the manufacturers that adhere to these guidelines. So what do you think there's any specific guidelines aside from what OSHA has, HIPAA has, your cGMP practices, QA/QC, all the initials? Do you think there's anything really specific for cannabis that is lacking that needs to be invented for our industry?
Invented from a standards perspective or just in general? Because I'm a tech guy and I could think of a ton of.
Okay, well, let's talk about like new technologies that are coming out and how they could be applied in cannabis.
I mean, one of the things we're really evaluating is because we're an audit firm who can't travel during COVID.
Sure.
We can, but we can't get everywhere. So ultimately, we need the capabilities to be remote and to be able to have eyes and ears remotely. So how do we do that? Tech. You know, how you perform a remote inspection? Drones, robots, things that can give you eyes and ears inside a facility and allow you to, you know, effectively test all areas and all controls and all the standards and procedures that you need.
Yeah.
Augmented reality, Google Glass, things like that would help with shop floor training, right? So now you have the ability to be reading directions of what you need to do real time, as opposed to being trained once a year and forgetting what you're supposed to do. So any tech that we can apply, quality management systems, document management systems, so we can get all their documents remotely, evaluated, audit, virtual audits, anywhere we can apply tech to get visibility into that environment, it's great. So I love seeing the drones being put into use. We're doing a pilot program in the spring with a drone company. So pretty excited about that. But there's a lot there, and the agro-tech, the Canna tech, it's constantly evolving. There's a lot of green tech coming out of that space, which I'm not even going to get into because there's so much, but it's, you know, water management systems, using the Internet of Things and sensors in your irrigation process, right, to save money. The list goes on and on. So when you say what needs to be invented, sky's the limit. You know, this is an industry where you can go out and come up with your own extraction system, as long as it's, you know, tested, validated, all that fun stuff.
So did we miss the boat? And I feel like in somewhere like California, when their gray market exploded, you know, before they really got adult use, but medical and, you know, decriminal, that was very loose. There was a lot of people who started home businesses where they were, you know, just making, I mean, not that I want to go back to this, but they were just making brownies on their countertop and the cat would run across the table, and, you know, it was not a good setup. But I think within that there was then they got off the ground and they got a small kitchen space, and maybe they would share kitchen time with other people, and they started these little businesses and scaled organically. And now many of them are, you know, amazing edibles companies and things like that. So did we miss our window in a lot of these states now, because the country, and certainly Canada, is so far along that you have to go straight from I want to do an edibles company to I need $1 million? Kind of.
I don't think there's any straight answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, well, legally, of course, you could still make them on the countertop with the cat. That never. Well,
Sure.
yeah, but I'm saying, like, if you wanted to, I feel like we almost missed our mom and pop phase. That these regs are going to come out so quick, they're going to blindside people who aren't ready for them.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, that's one of my biggest fears, because not only that, you lose the culture when that happens too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all just starting to enjoy the culture a little bit here, at least some of us, more than others, a little later to the game. But, you know, I think it's going to happen. You know, but if we have, I think it's already happening, I should say, but it's still at the state level, you know, and the states still do have the ability to ensure that people have opportunities in this industry. And so I think it's incumbent upon the governments and the assemblymen and the senators and everyone else out there who's got a voice and some type of public civic duty responsibility to ensure that there's a strong focus being put on that as we move forward, all the way through federal legalization, not just this year, not next year. You know, and that's on all fronts. It's on the social front, it's on the quality side, on the regs. Make sure that these states have adequate provisions in there, right? And it just needs to happen. So it sucks seeing politics get in the way sometimes. And I know we can't always trust politicians to do the right thing, but you know, we are stuck with them, and unfortunately. And the best thing
I
we
don't
can
know.
do.
I feel like this country's slipping towards anarchy every day. So
Yeah, you know, we're a young country. We're still what, 300 years old, so might go back to the North and South again. I don't know. I heard, isn't there a territory in Oregon that's succeeding?
Yeah, they did. I don't think it went well. I think they rejoined. I'm not real sure, but yeah, that's for a way different show than mine. I just talk about weed.
We won't go there.
But yeah. So cannabis. What's your guess on how long till federal legalization?
Federal legalization. I mean, everything changes with the election this year. Both presidents never said they were against it, although Biden's played his fair share of, you know, roles in the past that have gotten in the way of the industry.
Yeah.
But I do believe, I can see, just given the politics here, big pharma wanting to get in. I see it getting descheduled,
Yeah.
and the clinical trial error kicking in. We talked about that before, and
How about psychedelics? We just got mushrooms
yeah,
decriminalized, and we're about to. Let me knock on wood, don't jinx it. But yeah, I think that's the next big wave we're gonna see everyone going into. And I told people already, like, leave me out of shrooms. I did weed. Let someone else take the lead on that. I'm ready to ride off in the sunset.
well, he did all the
Um,
work for him, right? And now they just got to come in and open up
what?
shop.
Yeah, I did all the work. We went through the door. I got shot and bruised and bloodied, and paved the way for people to just come in and be like, "How about mushrooms too?"
Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
Yeah, we just did weed. Why not?
No, I
Same
mean, I
week.
think it's great. It's if it comes from the ground, I'm
Hmm.
good. So, and there's so many benefits to it for people with PTSD and anxiety and
Yeah.
other things, which I think hasn't even really, well, I know hasn't even really been firmly discussed throughout the public communities. We're
Hmm.
still convincing people on cannabis.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here's some mushrooms.
Dude, they just slid that through. It's amazing. But I feel like that's going to be really interesting for research too. I think that's why that was the next one up to bat for legalization or decriminalization, because we're actually seeing some really cool studies come out.
Yeah, we haven't started this yet, but we do have an objective for 2021 to evaluate our business model for that industry.
Very cool.
Because again, the same standards need to be applied. I think you're going to see more of a medical push on that than anything else,
Hmm.
because nobody wants a bunch of people tripping out, running around recreation.
True.
Well, I take that back. It is
Yeah,
funny.
no, I think there are. I just think it doesn't look as good on a brochure.
Hey, look, there's John. Yep, he's tripping face again. He's naked in his front yard. Hey, John, how you doing? Put the gun down. Um,
For sure.
yeah, so I'm very excited to see that. I hope it doesn't. I hope it goes through and
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
make some strides there too, because that opens up a whole nother industry, whole new set of players.
And
Um,
I do feel like big pharma is going to scoop that up real quick.
we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see.
So, because different operators have different needs, what do you see in the grow, process, dispense? What's most vital? What are we missing? What do companies need to really make sure their I's and T's are done?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest risk um, to the industry, aside from politics and everything else, from an operational standpoint, is the supply chain. I'll go one step further and say value chain, because what people need to really be the most cognizant of is where you're getting your data, where you're getting your products, where you're getting your supplies. Unless you can control all parts of your value chain, you're really at risk of who
Hmm.
you're doing business with. So one, make sure you thoroughly vet your third parties, perform third-party audits. We do assessments for third parties and vendors to make sure that they have good practices in place and that you can rely on their operations for your operations. Um, but you also need to make sure that you're looking outside of just the product touching supply chain. It's pre-sale, right? It's post-sale. It's the CAPA process. If there's a product recall, being able to trace that back through your supply chain becomes increasingly more difficult if you cannot get to your vendors and suppliers because they shut their doors.
Hmm.
So you need transparency, both for your patients, for your consumers,
Yeah.
throughout all parts of that process. And that's not easy, because not everyone's going to give you insight into their operations.
Yeah.
Data companies absolutely should. So when you're talking about, I say value chain, I go above and below the supply chain, right? Because you put data up in the cloud. Who are you using? Where are you storing your data?
Yeah.
How well protected is it? Do you have a right to audit that firm and come in and evaluate their compliance processes? So all these things really need to be carefully looked at, and you want to control as much of that value chain as possible. Bring
Hmm.
things in little by little as you grow. That's how you become a vertical, right?
Sure.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of risk in that, and I
I
do
mean,
see.
I feel like there's also, of course, all these things: data risk, HIPAA compliance, all the technical, cybersecurity, those risks. But we also have some actual risks with product contamination and things that are, I guess that's QA QC, I guess that's cGMP, but especially because we get this bias so quick. Like the vape crisis was like two contaminated carts from vitamin E acetate, and like a few people like of course it was a crisis, and your heart goes out to anyone who suffered, but that we're blaming these wide breadth of things on a couple bad apples, a couple bad operators.
Yep.
And it just seems like the very most simple things we could put into place would protect people from that. And it just harms the industry because there's still fear there,
Mhm.
so they hear these things and then they ban every vape thing in America, which is great for certain people who need it, like who don't want to combust or do whatever. So,
Yeah.
I feel like not, like, I just want to shake people sometimes and be like, just don't screw it up for the rest of us. Just, yeah. No,
Knock it off.
I know money's important, but you got to think of some safety and consumer health and
And
well-being.
and it's true. And when you think about the ability to do that, and supply chain, and you think about GMP and being able to prevent product being contaminated, it's also product being tampered with, right? So when
Yeah.
supply chain, once it leaves, you're the cultivator, you're putting your name on that box. And it gets passed over here, and some disgruntled employee sprays fentanyl all over it.
Yeah.
Then you got a whole different issue on your hands. So it's a
Like
matter
you
of
said, a disgruntled employee does what?
sprays fentanyl all over it, does
Oh,
something
sprays fentanyl. Oh, that
or
was very
whatever,
specific. Okay.
peas on it.
That's what I thought you said. Okay. But fentanyl is
Uh,
more appropriate for the show. P
I
is
don't know.
probably more likely that the employee just,
There's all sorts of whack jobs out there. I'm not putting anything behind anyone.
yeah.
Past it. Yeah. So the more control, the better. The more visibility, the better. The more in-house, the better. But the piece that I think is going to be most interesting is the logistics, warehouses, supply, distribution,
Yeah.
and seeing that evolve, because we're not seeing a lot of that right now. There's some, sure,
Mhm.
um, but there's going to be a massive explosion of those warehouse, distribution, and logistics centers that are going to support that supply chain, and not
Yeah.
just for bud and product, but for the packaging and everything else that's going to go into this. Um, haven't even seen that yet to any great extent.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that we have such a vertical supply chain where one company does everything at a very early level. Because maybe I'm wrong, but just thinking through this, like until you're like McDonald's, maybe then you grow your own potatoes, and chop them up and sell them and fry them. And, maybe Starbucks, I don't know if beer companies grow their own hops or wheat at this point, but you would have to be really far up there. It's not like you start a home brew and then start growing wheat immediately in your garage. Like it seems like we go seed to sale really quick in this industry. And I kind of wonder, are we letting people specialize a lot? Because you have to worry about all these things. And it seems like you could do one thing exceedingly well. But sometimes I wonder if we're diluting our capabilities. What do you think?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, it's a really good point, because as you're growing, and there's something to be said about spreading yourself too thin, right? And if
Yeah.
you're trying to be a jack of all trades and wear all these hats as opposed to going to a specialist,
Mm-hmm.
myself included, let's talk about my marketing scheme. I'm actually hiring a VP of digital marketing, so I'm pretty stoked about that, because
You hired one, you said?
I'm in the process of hiring one.
Oh,
I'm
very
going
cool.
to
Nice.
post an ad this week. So yeah, like stoked, because I did all this stuff for the grassroots collaboration group myself. I started doing some of the stuff for PC, but I've just been so busy with actual client work
Yeah.
that the social took a back seat. Completely different model. But
Uh-huh.
I'm really looking forward to getting somebody on board and having a dedicated focus on that. Because to your point,
Mm-hmm.
it's not my forte, and it detracts from my ability to work with my clients and apply the standards and do the stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
So it's a
Your
balancing act.
passion for
That
compliance.
passion for compliance, yes. It's a balancing act. Any type of
Yeah.
startup, it's an art, it's a balancing act, and you just got to try and walk that tripwire without falling off. So,
Yeah, and I mean that's what everyone's doing right now, and that's why I've been having some people on the show who are kind of doing ancillary things, because I think it's helpful to both the operator, if you have a dispensary, to know these services are out there and this is what your competition might be doing. But I
mhm.
also think, because you said there's so many startups right now, everyone's looking to get their foot in the door, and I always say the best thing is look at your current skill set. We probably need it in the cannabis industry somewhere.
Yep.
And then I one day I had a woman approach me who was a hairdresser, and she said, "I'm a hairdresser. How can I apply these skills to cannabis?" And I said,
I need a haircut, and I work in cannabis.
I might need a haircut." No, but like I didn't know what to say to her, and I told that story to someone. And they're like, "CBD hair products." I was like, "Good one." But yeah, that one stumped me. But usually, whatever it is, there's almost a direct correlation between you can do that for the cannabis industry.
I'll do you one better.
Okay.
Consumption hair salon, hair salon lounge, a
Oh,
nail salon. Like you can bring wine in, and it's a
sure.
glass of wine and get your nails done.
Like stoners and scissors, like something like that. Yeah. Stoners with scissors. Which does not sound. I
No,
think there's going to be some regulations for
I
that
need
one.
some insurance for my business. Well, what do you do? Well, I have opened a company called Stoners with Scissors. We don't run with them. We just cut hair.
Yeah, they probably just drop them a lot. I don't know.
That's
But
funny.
anyway, CBD hair product may have been better. So where do you see this? Okay, so we talked about federally what we're gonna see in the future. What do
Mhm.
you think when this goes globally? One thing I always say with that is, especially for our growers, right now indoor is, obviously it's great, but indoor is more expensive to when we come down to needing this for other purposes. And in Canada right now, I've heard commercial production has gotten down to a nickel a gram. So somewhere where property is expensive might be undesirable. So I think in the short term, we'll be growing weed, next to the tobacco fields in Kentucky,
Mhm.
where rain and sunshine is free. And eventually I think it'll be coming in from Colombia.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of the businesses that are starting now in New Jersey will be here in 20 years. So what, from a global perspective, where do you see this future going?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, um, and that cost per gram is new to me because I thought it was still 0.55, but that was a couple of years ago when I was doing some research. US was like around 0.5, and then the stat I read was Colombia was 0.05. So I was,
Yeah, so Colombia, well, Canada's had some time now to play with things. They might have it down.
it's not going to take a genius to start putting outsourcing processes in place, right? When
Yeah.
you can do something in a environment that's conditioned with humidity, lighting, sunlight, hours in the day, 24/7, 365 days a year,
Yeah.
that's your ideal spot, right? So, especially, it's just going to follow suit with all the other industries. You'll outsource. Some of it'll be brought back in-house. They'll have issues. It'll move from, like it did from India to Vietnam to Brazil to Costa Rica, like call centers did, right?
Hmm.
So you're going to see that type of model happen.
Yeah.
Um, that might not be bad. I have a whole bunch of quality concerns I won't get into right now, but going back to standardization, this the standardization of global controls has to happen in advance of any type of international commerce. For this to go on a boat from New York to Amsterdam, which I can't wait for,
Yeah.
it's going to have to adhere to Amsterdam standards, and those should be derived and somewhat aligned with the US's, right? So pharmaceutical companies have been doing this for hundreds of years, 100 years, maybe 150.
So wait, that's interesting. This has just occurred to me. So there's like some shady loopholes pharmaceutical companies have been working for a long time. Is there anything that we haven't gotten to yet in cannabis where we're like, oh, we're gonna start doing some shady stuff soon?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Start.
You've signed things that have prohibited you from talking about these things.
But no, I mean, I
I
think
bet there are though.
the globalization piece here, a lot of us are still waiting to make the money internally in the U.S. We're still waiting for the big payday. And once the Feds flip the switch, one of my concerns would be that globalization happens before even the mom and pops are getting into the market. So, because that's a cost, but it's also an advantage.
Yeah.
So it can go both ways. It could be cheaper and make more opportunities for the mom and pop. You just outsource and go to Colombia and get your products. But presents a whole new set of risks, whole new set of challenges from a logistics and supply chain perspective. Now you're dealing with international product. So,
well, that's an interesting point. I feel like that brings up a ceiling that you are no longer sky's the limit. Like right now, I ask people, I'm in New Jersey, to name a edibles brand. And quite often they can't. They can't even name one edibles brand because, if you live in California, Colorado, you could probably name 50, so we still have a little bit of time here, it feels like,
yep.
But I feel like if they don't get in time, we're going to get the equivalent of Amazon. And right now it's sky's the limit. You could start your edibles brand. You could build the empire. Is it going to be hard? Yes, but there's still the American dream where you could be the top of it.
Right.
Once the Amazons and the Walmart of weed are there, the most you're going to be able to do is have like a little Amazon business, an Etsy business, you know, something like that, or, you know, maybe sell a product, be a wholesaler, you're not going to be able to be the top of the pyramid anymore. So I feel like we might have entirely missed that window in cannabis, or we're at the precipice of missing it.
And it's going to come down to, like, so in ShopRite, you got to pay for a shelf where you are on the shelf. You're either
Yeah.
eye level, right, or something to that effect. So you're going to have opportunities to be on the bottom shelf, right? You can't afford to pay for the top shelf. But you're right. I think that window, it could be missed very easily for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, you know, whoever's out there waiting, don't wait.
Don't wait anymore. No, because people love to say it's the Wild West. I was like, it is not the Wild West anymore. It was the Wild West maybe 10, 15 years ago. Like, there's a lot of money now. There's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of people, smart people getting into this who also who don't necessarily have the best interest of the industry at heart. So kind of people like me, people who kind of wear their heart on the sleeve at this, you know, thing. It's scary for the future where this is going when the Walmarts of the world come in.
Yeah, and you know, especially if they start partnering with the MSOs and the larger, more established brands to stock their shelves, you know, and they have those contracts with the, you know, the larger MSOs. You know, those are the contracts they're going to fill first, and whatever space they have left on their shelves, they're going to, you know, it might be that little thing at the counter at checkout. It might be on the very back of the store in the corner next to the bathroom by the Purell thing. But yeah, sure, you plan ahead, you have a strategy to scale up, get people that know how to build relationships and can foster those high value added relationships.
Well, actually, this comes around really good to compliance full circle, because the people who are going to get crushed first are the ones who just completely just don't have their shit together. You know, the ones who are actually operating in a compliant manner, adhering to FDA guidelines, and have good facilities are going to A, be absorbed better, or B, be able to compete. Because those big names, once you start talking about shelf space, they're not going to take people. They're not going to take the liability of brands that aren't up to those compliance standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to weed a lot of people out, pun intended. You know, a lot of people are going to rise to the top. A lot of people are going to get weeded out. And that's why I say, you know, the more you can invest in quality compliance and establishing good practices now, the better off you're going to be in the future. The more successful you're going to be in the short term as well.
Yeah.
Because your products can be valued higher. If you can demonstrate where you get all your materials from, demonstrate that your grower provides passes all the right controls and standards for their process. That's the type of situation, that's the type of place you want to be in, right?
Yeah.
You want to cut corners, you want to just do something real quick and get on 7-Eleven, go ahead, great, make a buck, get out, but it's not what we're trying to do. So
yeah, for sure. And the cash grab thing, that's awful. But I mean, I guess it's great if that's all you want to do, but it's frustrating to see, you know, people take an industry that already has a shaky reputation when there's so much fear and misinformation out there, and then confirm people's bias. I do think this is also, people should worry about this out the gate, because now so many who are just trying to get in are in application rounds. And this is, I think a lot of people write it for the app with all the good intentions of the world, and they get all their SOPs down. And these are all the wonderful things we're going to do. And then they open their doors and money's running low and they're in panic mode, and they implement none of them. But really, they're in the application because they are important. And these are things, once we get them written, and I guess, I don't know if PQC does, if you work with applicants as well, to try to get these things right the first time, you really should implement them too then.
Yeah. You know, and that's what we advise all our clients. If somebody comes and they're looking for an application, we've had a couple of people reach out from other states that are recently legalizing. But the biggest thing to do is, you know, follow through. And if obviously you're going to spend all that time and money putting those procedures in place, not just to check a box, but again, to your point, that's why you won the license, because they're expecting you to do those things. So, you know, don't just have it be an SOP that you wrote and it sits on a Google Drive and collects dust. You know, make sure it's current, make sure you look at it periodically. You're supposed to periodically review your SOPs to make sure they're current with your processes and practices, and do it from the beginning. You know, it's really all you can do. It's going to save you time and energy and a whole lot of headaches in the back end. It's
time, energy, and probably money too, because it's going to save you from having to redo things every time and scrap your prior system and start from scratch with a compliant one.
You got to retrain all your employees after that.
No, I mean, this was really great. There's a lot of good information. I think this is information people maybe have not heard or thought of before, or have maybe thought of and written off. So I'm glad we got to touch on kind of why this matters. Why don't you tell us what's coming up next for you, for the industry, what people should look out for, how they should get in touch with you, all that good stuff.
Definitely. Well, we've got a busy year coming up in Q1 2021. As I mentioned before, this year was really focused on a lot of capabilities and enabling tech. So we're kicking off some pilot programs. We've got the drone pilot program. We're kicking off with a potential client next year. And we're really looking to grow our team. So for us to be successful, we need this multi-state network of auditors just to be a rotating door into the industry. So if anyone's out there and they want to get involved in audit compliance, quality control, if you're sitting in Nevada and you can help out with clients in Nevada because I can't get there, great. You know, we want to hear from you.
So that's amazing. People are always asking about cannabis industry jobs. You just posted one on my podcast. What kind of background does someone need to be an auditor?
An auditor. So if you're good with documentation management, if you're analytical, if you're good with problem solving, if you work independently, evaluate documentation, review it up against a checklist, it's not rocket science, you know, but you have to have that mindset of ensuring that there's traceability, things are documented appropriately. You have certifications in the life science space and in the audit space, even better. So, you know, those are the type of qualifications you want. And, you know, we're really looking to have this network grow. We've got about 100 extended freelance contractors and consultants now across almost all 50 states.
Wow, very cool.
And that's great, but we also want redundancy and succession, right? Because we want these people to come in, get experience, learn about compliance, and then go take a full-time job in the industry and take that knowledge and bring it with them. Because that's how we're going to standardize, is by seeding the industry with the people who are working off the standards that we're looking to push.
Cool.
And we're pretty excited about it. So,
and how can people get in touch with you if they want to look in?
You can email
website,
me.
social.
Sure. Yeah, the website. I meant to put it up on the side, but I didn't do it. But www.precision-qc.com.
Okay.
You can reach me at precision-qc.com.
Okay.
We're on Instagram at precision_QC. We're on Facebook. Just look up Precision Quality Compliance. We're on LinkedIn.
All right. I'll throw them in the show notes. That's good enough.
But cool. No, we're stoked. We've got a lot planned for next year, and we're really looking to help not just New Jersey. Obviously, New Jersey's one of our primary focuses, but we are across the states. So if you need help anywhere in the country, reach out.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
No, thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Peace.